Keisha, Shanna, welcome to the podcast. Is there anything that you'd like to share before we get started?
I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for having us on your podcast to chat about FASD. We're really excited to be here.
So, for the people who don't know or aren't familiar with FASD, can you just give a brief explanation of what that is, what it looks like?
For sure. FASD is called Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. It's a disability that can happen when alcohol is used during pregnancy. And people with FASD can be impacted in very, very different ways. And it's a very unique disability. So, kind of the expression we like to use is when you've met one person with FASD, you've met one person with FASD. And people with FASD have endless strengths and abilities, and we always like to highlight the positive aspects of FASD.
Okay, that's awesome. So I guess to start us off, can you tell us a bit about the FASD network and programs and things that happen there?
For sure. So the FASD Network, we are a provincial nonprofit organization and we provide supports and services across the province of Saskatchewan. We have an office located here in Saskatoon and in Regina, but we also have a provincial outreach worker. So it doesn't matter where anyone's located in the province, they can absolutely connect with us to get services, supports, or education on FASD. All of the work that we do at the FASD Network is grounded in 5 guiding principles. I'm going to highlight them just really quickly so people know how to connect with us. So the first one is we're low barrier to access. And so we recognize that there's lots of barriers and red tape built into every system. And as a nonprofit organization, we work really hard to not have barriers in place so people can connect with us. So the huge takeaway to that is people don't actually need a diagnosis of FASD to connect with us. It could be someone who says, I think I could have FASD. I think my child might have FASD. There's no diagnosis required. To get a diagnosis, it's actually quite complex. There's some pretty intense wait lists in Saskatchewan, and so that's not a requirement for people to connect with us. We also don't have a wait list because who loves a wait list? Nobody does. And so we recognize that we are not meeting people in the correct way if we put them on a wait list. And so typically when people call in for services, they don't need help in 6 months. They're calling in because something's going on now and we need to support them with what it is that they need help with. And so we kind of triage that in the background and then work really hard to meet that individual as fast as we can. The next piece is that we're a client-led organization. So essentially when someone connects with us, we fully recognize that they are the expert on their lives, not us. And so when they meet with us, we don't say, this is what you need to do. We say, what do you need help with? And let's figure out how to help you. Going back to FASD is really unique. So nobody's needs are the same. And so we're there to listen and help them, give them support with whatever it is that they need support with. The next guiding principle is that we operate through a trauma-informed harm reduction. There's 2, trauma-informed and harm reduction. Many people with FASD have experienced trauma, and so it's incredibly important that we operate through that lens and that we continuously meet people where they're at. So for example, someone might be in active use and they can still access services through us. And we just, like I said, always meet them where they're at. Another big thing that I really, really love that fits with our guiding principles is we don't ban people. Lots of different organizations can ban people. They might have an interaction with someone. Sometimes people with FASD don't always have a filter and so can kind of say what's on the top of their mind. And if we tell them to leave and never come back, we don't really teach them anything. And so we might say, hey, you need to leave for today. Let's try again tomorrow and let's come back. Let's work with people to come back from hard conversations. And then the last guiding principle is that we're FASD-informed. And so essentially what that means is, that we operate through an FASD lens. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but it's people with FASD are incredibly misunderstood in systems. Often, behaviors can be seen as intentional and purposeful, but when you can take it back through that brain-based lens and add some, understanding and show that there's different ways to work with people with FASD, I think that's really important. And that I think really sets us apart from lots of other organizations, is that we do operate through that lens. It's a very long-winded answer, hey?
No, I think that's really important. What can other places like schools or other organizations or just institutions do to just make sure that they're also maintaining an opening and welcome space for people?
I always highly encourage, I always say FASD crosses every sector. So whether you're working in a school or even, a store, or you're a pharmacist or working in healthcare, people with FASD cross every sector. And so having understanding, getting education on FASD is really important. And I think, too, is really meeting people where they're at. Taking the opportunity to get to know people, to understand them, is really, really important. And I think a huge aspect is just communication. And I heard this expression, it wasn't mine, about a year ago, and an individual said, if we don't know how to communicate with people, that's the biggest barrier of all. And I think that's so relative in the world of FASD, is communication. And sometimes I'm a really fast talker, and that's not always a good thing for someone who has FASD. We have to slow it down a bit, or maybe we're using words that people don't understand. And so then, they get a consequence or something like that for something they don't understand. And then there's a behavior. And so often in the world of FASD, and I think that adds to the stigma, is individuals with FASD are given, like I said, consequences, whether that's in the legal sector, in schools, for things they don't understand. And then it adds, and then they have this behavior and adds to the stigma. And I think part of shifting that narrative is like, let's put the blame back on the systems. Let's let the systems and people working in those different organizations, let them understand and encourage them to get the information on FASD. And I think it can make a really impactful difference.
I think when you mentioned meeting people where they're at is really important. That's something that I've learned like through schooling and working out in the public and that kind of thing. I think that's really important. And just that alone takes the pressure off for a lot of people and just makes it like people feel way safer. Accessing resources can be scary or intimidating on their own. And it sounds like you guys are doing a really good job, like reducing that stress and that kind of thing. But what would you suggest to people who maybe are scared to get help or do find things like that intimidating?
Yeah, that's hard, right? Is making the phone call or connecting is sometimes that hard step. But also, I think recognizing with us that we, if someone connects with us and they can only connect for 10 minutes, then that's what we do. If we're doing some paperwork to figure out what they need help with and they get through 10 minutes and they're at their max, then we're like, okay. Or we meet people in community, right? They don't have to come to us. And we work with them at their pace. And I think, picking up the phone or making that connection sometimes is the hardest thing, but also know that we can meet people where they're at in community. They don't have to come to us. And we're a lifetime organization. And so if someone is hesitant or they make that initial connection and then they get a little bit worried and then they don't want to connect for a little bit, that's okay. The next time they connect, we're going to pick up where we left off. And people can connect as much as they want, as often as they want, or they can disconnect, right? So if someone connects with us for 6 months and then they kind of drop off the radar, I call it, and call again in 2 years, we're going to pick up where we left off. And I think it's, like I said, that initial connection is hard, but I think once people connect and have some conversations, they'll see that there's a whole different community out there.
I just kind of wanted to hear a bit more of like how you started with your support and I guess how and well with the support on how it guided you through today and the benefits.
With my support system, I have my mom, I have quite a bit of people on my side actually, and it's really helped me to get through like just day-to-day stuff because you know, it's not necessarily as hard, but as somebody with FASD, it can be a little bit more challenging. Um, I can get through it. It just takes a little more effort, you know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
for example, a task like I need reminders constantly,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, for a task like showering, for example, my mom kept reminding me to shower and I kept forgetting, so I just would and I showered.
Yeah.
Um,
You just need that reminder.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, wait, well, there was another thing I wanted to ask too. Oh yeah, okay. So, is there anything else that you would say to anybody who would want that support? Because I heard from your side, about like the support systems and like I guess people who are not fully sure. But what would you say, coming from somebody who has FASD and deals with that?
I would just say like if you're ever feeling nervous, honestly reach out. Like just reach out. Like I guess it could be harder for some people, but um I mean like it's you never know what could happen. It could really help you or it could really like impact your life, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
I'd just say reach out if you can, when you can, and they'll be there to help.
Oh, nice.
Have you ever experienced like any like stigmas or is like any common myths that people assume or anything that you'd like to clear up for people?
Yes, actually. A lot of people like just think like it's a disability obviously, but it impacts everyone in different ways, so everyone assumes that everyone's the same with FASD, so they can't just certain stuff they can't do, can't see, and it's all different for everyone. It impacts everyone completely different. So each individual person with FASD is going to be impacted in a different type of level, way, or experience than others with FASD as well. There can be high functioning and low functioning. It's just, it varies.
One of the things that I am incredibly proud of Keisha of is that she has become a pretty cool advocate in connecting other youth to services through us. And when we talk about stigma on FASD, one of the things that I'm really starting to see, and Keisha is my teacher and always has been my teacher, and I always say FASD is really complex. There's nobody in this world that has it 100% figured out. If you ever meet someone who does, I say call their bluff and then tell them to meet Keisha and she'll remind them that they don't have it figured out because she reminds me. And so I always say it's a journey that I walk with her and she is my favorite teacher. But one of the things that she has taught me lately is I think when we talk about stigma with FASD, I think often what I'm starting to see is maybe that it's the professionals and kind of this older generation of people that have more of that stigma of FASD and Keisha's generation, maybe that's shifting. And I've seen Keisha, connect friends to us and have really open conversations such as, do you think you could have FASD? And someone goes, well, I don't know. What is FASD? And Keisha says, do you think maybe your mom drank while she was pregnant with you? Or maybe she didn't know she was pregnant. And that youth is like, yeah, I probably do. Okay, let's get you connected to services. And I think that is so cool and so huge. And I really like that. I think there's a, opportunity for a youth movement to start really shifting the stigma on FASD. And that makes me, well, I'm always very proud of her. But that's a really cool thing that she has taught me lately.
That just makes me feel real proud too, just hearing that from someone. I just think that it's really nice of like what you guys are doing, and especially with like your network. And I liked hearing about how like you don't even need a diagnosis and all that. I just like how it's like what we've been saying. It's it's straightforward. It's if you need that help, then you guys are there.
We always say, hey, we do have hard times. It's not that life is always easy and systems are complex, and they're hard to navigate when you have FASD. But one thing we always talk about is in our hardest moments and our hardest times is how do we learn from it, and me and Keisha always come back, right? And we, my boring joking. We always come back. We've had hard times. We will continue to have hard times. But I think what gets me through it, and I always remind Keisha, is that we can come back and we're like, how do we shift this? How do we make it? How do we work on that system to maybe make it so the next family or the next youth that's coming through with FASD maybe won't have this experience? And I think for me, and I remind Keisha in our harder times, that gives me hope and purpose. And I always remind Keisha that, she impacts the world in ways that I don't think she fully understands.
I think it's really important that you really focus on highlighting the strengths, and that's something that I've come to learn as well, and focusing on the good and focusing on the strengths of each individual. So taking into consideration the older generations and how maybe their thoughts on FASD and their opinions and the stigmas that they might have, how can we shift it from blame to support, especially from those older generations?
So I think in the older generation, right, that shame and blame is like there is lots of misinformation about FASD in the world, that you had to, as people drank on purpose and all these things, and that it's like only people that are dealing with substance use or whatnot that have individuals with FASD or kids with FASD, and those are all myths, right? And so I think part of shifting that perspective is understanding the current information, the current stats on FASD. So for example, right now in Canada, they estimate that 4% of the Canadian population is impacted by FASD. That's quite high. So kind of to make a comparison, in Canada, when they combine the rates of autism, Down syndrome, and cerebral palsy, FASD surpasses the rates of those three disabilities combined. Okay, it makes it really, really like one of the most prevalent disabilities in Canada, and probably the most underfunded disability in Canada because of the stigma that's attached to it, right? We often, people will think it's, if you used alcohol or substance while you're pregnant, that you're this terrible person, etc. And that's not our messaging. I want to tell you, at the FASD Network, our messaging is that FASD is in fact not 100% preventable. I want to clarify that. Technically, is it? Yes. If no alcohol is used during pregnancy, the child is not going to have FASD. Okay, so if the pregnant person or dad or whoever has FASD, but there's no alcohol used during pregnancy, there's no genetics. They're studying that. There's no proof there. So technically, is it preventable? Yes. In a broader context, is it no? Because here's another interesting stat. Did you know in Canada that 60% of pregnancies are unplanned? And 80% of the Canadian population uses alcohol, right? So lots of times people don't even know, right? They don't even know that they're pregnant. And so sometimes even when people come in and they meet with us and they say, we're not sure, I might have FASD, I'm not sure. It could be just as simple as, hey, do you think your mom maybe had a couple of drinks before she found out she was pregnant? And if someone goes, yeah, guess what? They're connected. Right? And it's not our role to ask how much, how often, etc., because that adds to the shame and blame. And I will tell you, shame and blame serves no positive purpose in the world of FASD. Compassion, empathetic conversations, understanding, that's the support that we need, right? And then there's a whole list of reasons why people might use substances or alcohol when they're pregnant and know that they're pregnant. And again, compassion, empathy, and understanding go a long way. And I think just a majority of people don't even know that they're pregnant, or they find out when they're 4 months along and they're like, oh, but I didn't drink while I was pregnant, but they didn't take into account the first 4 months that they didn't know. Or because of the stigma, they might say, no, I didn't, because of fear, right? And so that's our role in a sense at the FASD Network too, is to work to shift that conversation, to shift it from that shame and blame, to understand it as, compassionate and empathetic conversations. And as well as FASD, many, like in our older generations, there was it was first kind of recognized in 1968, really came to the forefront in 1973. So our older generations didn't even know about the risks of using alcohol during pregnancy. So I think there's, just really understanding the complexity. Alcohol is very normalized. Who do they target? They often target women, right? And all their, adverts on alcohol, and it just can happen, and it can happen to anyone. So again, another long-winded answer.
No, that's awesome. I think an important place to start is understanding why those stigmas are there and why those challenges are there and why those barriers come up. And I think targeting that first, like you said, educating people, talking about it, having these conversations is really important. How can family members or friends or anybody support somebody during their pregnancy?
I think, the research shows, like, if a partner abstains or doesn't use alcohol during their pregnancy, then the pregnant person is less likely to use alcohol during their pregnancy. So everyone plays a part. I also think if someone does, use alcohol during their pregnancy, it's still, at the end of the day, it's their choice. And we still support them along their journey. We give them the information, don't, in a sense, don't write them off if they still do, right? Like that's also not, we still got to support people and the choices they make. But I think giving them the information, if you're in a situation where it's comfortable too, and sometimes maybe it doesn't feel comfortable, and that's okay as well. But I think just supporting, that non-judgmental support can really make an impactful difference.
I wanted to ask, when someone is actively using alcohol or any type of substance, you can say, how can we best support them?
Yeah, that's an awesome question that doesn't have a right or wrong answer, in a sense, because, if you have a friend, or maybe that maybe they don't know that they're pregnant, or they know that they're pregnant and they're, using alcohol or other substances, they might not actually understand they might not understand what FASD is, and that it can cause some, unintentional harms to the unborn baby. And so, I think potentially, providing that, having a conversation maybe about FASD and what you've learned, and what you understand on it, but not through a place of judgment, but more through that compassionate response, and providing them some education. And maybe, Keisha, do you have something, if you were in a situation where maybe one of your friends was pregnant and maybe was using a substance, how you would guide that conversation with them?
I would say, like, probably it's best to not do that stuff, but if they've already done it, it's okay. Like, it's nothing to worry about, really. Like, it is what it is, right? And I would probably just tell them, there's always resources out there to help you, and there's always supports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I would just add is that if someone did use, and sometimes it's hard for people to
Yeah.
stop, right? Especially if they're dealing with substance use, and that's okay. And just really reassuring them that they're not a bad parent, they're not a bad mom. Nobody uses substances or alcohol to cause harm intentionally, that it doesn't exist. And so lots of reassurance that it's okay. And as Keisha said, it is what it is, and there's resources and there's support, and less is better than more. And like I said, some people can't just stop, and that's okay too. And it just doesn't ever make anyone a bad parent or a bad mom. And I think that's really important, is just that reassurance. Everyone has different life circumstances, and judgment and shame and blame, they serve no positive purpose in the world.
We're just going to take a quick moment to hear from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Hard Knocks Talks and SIU West in partnership with Camponi Housing. To learn more about today's partners and sponsors, find the links in the show notes below. So, Keisha, what has been your experience with finding your diagnosis and understanding that, and the process of going through that in your life?
Honestly, like, it was interesting at first navigating how to be best, like, supported and stuff. And we're still tweaking that to this day. Like, we're still finding what works best for me and just everything like that. And we found like some good things, obviously, and we found some things that don't work, but we always keep trying to find things that work for me.
What are some of your goals, like in your life, that you hope to get to?
For me, I want to graduate. Like, that's a really big thing, so I'm working on that. I'm working on getting my credits and stuff. And I would I want to become a cop, like a police officer. So I've done quite a bit of things involved with policing and stuff like that. So that has helped a lot, but that's one of my like biggest goals in life is to become a cop.
Well, that's super cool. That's super cool. What has inspired you in wanting to be a police officer?
Um Honestly, I don't even know. I just kind of like have always had an interest in it. I've always had a passion for it, so it's just something I'd really think I'd be interested in and something that would work for me.
It's really important to, as you guys were like mentioning, to highlight the strengths and to focus on each individual and their own experiences and their own strengths. What are some strengths that you feel you have personally from your experience?
Um I I really like to um I'm really like crafty, I guess, and just open to like any hobby really. So I think that's a really good thing about me is I'm never really bored. Like, I play guitar, I bead, I crochet, stuff like that. And so those have helped me through a lot of tough times actually with my life and stuff. So I think that's one of my best a few of my best strengths.
I want to know your weaknesses and if you have any weaknesses, if you turned them into strengths.
Mm-hmm. A lot of my some of my main weaknesses was definitely like social skills and stuff like that. And I've turned it into strengths kind of just by being learning. I've learned along the way just to be myself, um, and just to more helps myself in a way that can help me learn that stuff. And I've kind of just like over the years I've learned a bunch of things about myself that I just kind of stay true to me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, kind of going on with some of Keisha's experiences and finding what works and what doesn't work has definitely been a rocky road and not always easy. You know, an example that we could use is school, right? You know, Keisha has had some frustrations along the way and very valid frustrations and often towards me about why, you know, we've changed schools or found, you know, something else. And that's hard. You know, we talk about it's hard, as Keisha highlighted. Social skills are hard, or you make a friend and then we have to change a school. But what we're always doing in the background is trying to find school that fits, right? People that get her, people that educators that, you know, take that time to get to know her and teach her in a way that she learns. And I think, you know, Keisha's understanding that now, but it definitely was hard for a while. Um, Going through that experience, I've changed schools or I've had to do this. And, you know, we always have hard conversations and, you know, we talk about it's out of just finding, you know, what works for you and not spending, if we know it's not working, there's no sense to keep spending time there if it's not working. And just kind of piggybacking off how Keisha said she crochets and she beads and how that's helped her through lots of hard things is Keisha has lots of part of, you know, how you experience your FASD is anxiety is very big. And one of the very cool things that Keisha learned is keeping her hands busy. Helps her body regulate and helps work through that anxiety. So we should have brought some of your crochet stuff because she's so talented, you guys.
Oh, that'd be awesome to see. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
She's
Yeah.
self-taught. She watched some YouTube videos and taught herself how to crochet. And because Keisha's sensory world is very, what do you call it? We'll say heightened. She likes things, her tactile, so how she feels the world. And so we have to buy the softest yarn you can find. And she makes these wicked stuffed animals, and she sold them, and she beads, and used to have hand tremors, and you don't have those anymore. And they used to help her with that. And so those, like, she's so incredibly talented that way, but also that's a huge coping strategy to get her through those really hard times. And we'll say you struggle in math, right? Math, it can be hard for lots of individuals with FASD. What do you need to crochet and to bead? You need to be able to do math. So when Keisha can figure out a pattern or a sequence, she excels. If you have to estimate, you're annoyed because you're like, there's a right or wrong answer. What do you mean I have to guess? You know? And so that's part of, learning. And Keisha, you've done occupational therapy, sensory-based OT, pretty much since she's been 5 years old. And I think that's really been a huge strength, is learning how her body interprets the world and feels the world. And I think that's really cool. And, she's in a really loud space. What do you do?
I use my coping mechanisms like beading, crocheting. I'll put in earplugs, listen to music, stuff like that.
Where an example would be, at school, gym, she would leave gym class because it's really loud. And then the gym teacher thinks she's skipping, right? When we're like, no, she's leaving the space because it's too noisy. And so I also am a firm believer that it doesn't always have to be the individual with a different ability to change. The space can change to fit that person as well. And so it's been really cool to have conversations even with that educator to say, hey, reminder to use her, her ear deafeners, her loop earbuds, but also, can you turn the music down? Because this space is really noisy for her. And I think that's cool. And Keisha's, even I remember in about grade 7 when you wrote your teacher a letter, about how noisy the space is. And, your words in that letter to your teacher were, I know the world doesn't revolve around me, but can you help make the classroom a little bit less loud? And he did, and that was very cool. And I think she's such a cool teacher. She just doesn't always realize that. And she has put a lot of work into figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And I think a big thing for families and, caregivers, and when you're working with people with FASD, is just to never give up. And, I always tease Keisha that she can't get rid of me, even if she tries, and that we always come back, and that no matter what, she's loved. And, you said to me not too long ago, you said, Mom, I won't do it again. I think yell at me, which I was like, but you will. And you know what, we'll still get through that. And I think that's a pretty amazing gift that we have, and an amazing gift that we can share with the world, is not to give up and to keep kind of forging forward and finding those things that work. And Keisha highlighted that she wanted to be a police officer. What she didn't highlight is that she did a police camp 2 years ago, right at the police station. Maybe you want to chat just a bit about that.
So I did this thing called the Youth Police Academy, and they had like a whole graduating ceremony for it and stuff. And it was pretty cool, actually. I got to play with their bomb bot. Like, we had classes pretty much with it. So like we had like presentations to do with other different with the different people and the groups in the station. And then we got to see the SWAT cat and stuff like that. So it was actually pretty cool. I got to meet a lot of amazing people during that as well. And the experience was just really cool in general. Like, we put on a whole bomb suit, which weighs 75 pounds in total. So that was really cool. But stuff like that was just pretty amazing.
With like the schoolings, you were saying how, it's difficult to find something that best supports her. What are like, is there any like schools that you came across that are pretty like supportive and good?
I can add to that. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I will give a shout out to Edie Fian because when Keisha went to Fian here in Saskatoon, I remember when Keisha started high school, I had so much anxiety as a mom because I thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And I will tell you that school was phenomenal, and the staff were amazing. And I kid you not, it's all about relationship. Taking that time to build relationship, that impact, I feel like you can't measure that. And so what I learned as Keisha's mom when you attended FIAN is because her educators there took the time to get to know her and know who she was, that 95% of the time on your hardest days, you were able to stay at school because she had safe people to go to. Okay. And that's huge. And I remember the first parent teacher interviews, I honestly went to just say thank you for that because they were so amazing. Fast forward to today, Keisha's not at FIAN anymore. No fault to the educators, but we have found another program that works, a school called the Farm School, and give a huge shout out to them as well. And again, it's that relationship. I will say when we brought up the farm school, Keisha's response was not fantastic. We can talk about that hard time, hey? And that we'll keep the language very good for the podcast, but we'll just say that she was very adamant that she was not going to that school. And then she got a referral to go there. We drove out there, and the minute we stepped out of the car, she said, I can't wait to go here. And it was just this whole shift. And it's just a really unique program. But again, these really amazing educators out at the school that just get to know her and build that relationship and see her amazing abilities, and they build on that. And so I think it's trial and error,
Yeah.
and it's finding what works. But honestly, it's finding the people that are able to build that relationship, that don't come in with that preconceived judgment, that don't read a file and say, oh, this youth has FASD, it means they're going to be this, this, and this. They put that aside and they come in and say, how do we best support you? And that is so huge. And as a parent, I thank you's never enough for that. So
That's awesome. Well, I just wanted to say that it was really nice meeting you both, especially seeing you again.
Yeah, I know that I've definitely learned a lot and will continue to share. And just to leave our listeners, what's something that you wish more people understood about FASD?
Personally, in my opinion, I wish more people understood it makes us no different. It just makes some things a little bit harder. There's more challenges, but we are no different than any other human being. We still are our own person, and we can achieve pretty much anything the normal person can.
Does it make anything easier for you?
Yeah, it does, cause knowing that I'm able to have like the supports I need and stuff just like helps me get through the day, even like with like school and stuff. For example, like if I'm having a hard day at school, my support system is always there for me, and I know it's like easy access and stuff. So
Yeah, I think that's really special, and I think you're such an inspiration and have a lot of knowledge, and I will continue to share and continue to educate myself. So for people to learn more, maybe to let other people know, where can people learn more about the FASD network?
you know what? If you just hit Google and you Google Saskatchewan FASD Network, we have an amazing website with a ton of resources. We have a 1-800 number people can call, they can email, and connect with us. And all of our resources are downloadable in PDF format, and they're in language that people understand. We actually just had our FASD awareness guide translated into Cree and Dene as well, and that's available on our website. And so, yeah, just Google the FASD Network of Saskatchewan, and don't ever hesitate to connect, to reach out with us, or to connect with us to, learn more or get connected to support.
Well, thank you guys both so much for joining us today. I know that I've learned a lot and are inspired by both of you and by the network. I will definitely continue to educate myself and to educate others. And so thank you.
It was nice meeting you guys, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive Discussions. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with a friend and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Until next time, keep diving deeper into the stories that matter.